All right, it's time to get started. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. My name is Mike Dickinson and I am the data librarian here on campus. I'm also the library liaison to the Department of Aerospace, Physics and Space Sciences. You can find me in room 122 on the first floor. That's the room with the green wall, if you know where the offices are with the colored walls. If you sit across from my office, I'll look up from my computer and we'll make awkward eye contact. It's great, it happens every day. And so this is a survival guide that I'm showing you, and it is really just a bare bones slideshow. The point of this presentation and the reason you have computers is so that you can follow along. And this is the only slide I'm going to show you just right now, because the next thing I want to do is show you the research guide that I've created supporting NVivo. So if you go to the library homepage, you just go to Research Guides, and from there, go to By Course or Topic. And after that, go to Topic Guides, and it'll be in here. I always pass it. Oh, not sure what's happening with this mouse. Yeah. There it is. Oh, I can't use this mouse. It's because it's on a slant. There it is. And this guide links out to a lot of their official documentations that the developers of NVivo have created. There's a little more in there, and I'm still developing it, so there will be more added. But the really important thing that I wanted to show you tonight is right here, and it's the Harry Potter sample project. Harry Potter is the theme I chose to show you a sample project. So if you want to navigate there and download that file and open it, then you can follow along, and I'll give you a moment to do that. Other thing I should note is that there are other sample projects available directly in NVivo. They're more robust than what I've created here today, but it's kind of difficult to understand what you're looking at if you're not familiar with the material. And I chose Harry Potter because it's one of the most popular book series of all time, and hopefully people are at least somewhat familiar with it. And some people are diehard Harry Potter's fans, and if I get something wrong or I spelled something wrong, please don't hold it against me. How's everyone doing? Do you got a question?
Yeah, just one more time, let's go to by course and topic. What are we looking at?
By course, and then it'll be topic guides,
Okay.
and then it'll be introduction to NVivo.
There's also a search bar in the research guide. You could always type in NVivo. That's easy.
And I just published this last week, so maybe in a month or so, as the page gets more traffic, you'll be able to Google just Florida Tech NVivo, and it will pop up. How's everyone doing? Have we found it? Everyone doing good? Okay, then I'm going to launch into my slides here. Okay, so an overview of NVivo. NVivo is an all-in-one lab notebook. It's an electronic lab notebook. These are growing in popularity, but it's designed to be used specifically for qualitative data analysis. Qualitative data, as opposed to quantitative data, is text and strings. It can be images, it can be video footage, as opposed to working with numbers, which is qualitative data. When you work with numbers, you're typically trying to make predictions and produce summary statistics, and when you're working with qualitative data, you're typically trying to draw unseen connections between ideas. So you can really do everything in an NVivo, and that's what makes it such a powerful tool. You can import all your files, you can keep all your notes in it, you can map out your project workflow in it. So it's really nice to be able to import 30 files into NVivo and sort through them that way rather than having 30 separate PDFs you have to scroll through. At the same time, it runs powerful text mining tools and data visualization tools that allow you to explore all of your materials at once. If you try to text mine 30 files at once, it would take forever just to load them in. It would be a lot of work if you're trying to do that with a traditional programming language, and there's a high learning curve to learn how to do that. This is a simple graphical user interface that is, so it's point and click technology, and that makes it a lot easier and a lot faster. If you're interested, you can download a 14-day free trial. We do have 4 copies here in the library. They're located in the DSL under the Geospatial Information Systems computers on the west wall. And there are also copies available in Crawford 611. The copies in Crawford 611 are NVivo for Mac, and that interface is a little different, but it can do all the same things. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is coding in NVivo, because coding is really most of the legwork that you're doing. And just like I have there, don't let the term coding trip you up, because when I think of coding, I think of learning a programming language and writing computer code. And that's not what that means here in NVivo. Coding in NVivo means assigning a theme to specific textual content. And I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So if we go to the Harry Potter sample, and we can open any file we want. And so these are nice files that I put in here because they're really well broken down, summaries of critical analysis of Harry Potter. So if we want to code something in NVivo, all we have to do is highlight it like this, right click. Oh wow, that doesn't work on this. Right click and hit codes. So what you're doing here is you're assigning it to a node. There's a slide on nodes, but nodes are the containers. So you code to nodes. I don't know why they chose that terminology. I don't really like it that much myself. It seems a little confusing, especially I think because it rhymes. But a node is just a container for a theme. The themes that you select in your project are going to depend on the questions you're trying to answer. So here I've just done a couple nodes based on a couple themes that are really popular throughout the Harry Potter series, and those are growth and identity. Here I just coded a piece on allegiance. So we can create a new node and give it a title. And click OK. And now if we navigate over to the nodes, which are over here, you can navigate and get to everything that you have in NVivo over on this left bar. You'll see that new node there. And it takes a minute to pop up. And there's everything that I just coded. And that is what's really powerful about NVivo, because it takes materials and aggregates them from across different files. And if I open a different node, you can see other coding that I've done across different files. It will give you the reference from the file that you've given it to, the amount of coverage, which is the amount of the file that's actually been coded in this section, and it aggregates them all together. So if you're looking for connections across multiple publications, different files, this is a great way of aggregating them in one place, as well as importing all your files into one place. As you may have seen, there were many files in here, which is a lot easier and a lot quicker for you to do than to open 10 different PDFs and have your notes open as well. It aggregates everything and makes it a lot cleaner and increases your productivity. So now I will travel back to the slides. Oh, that's the wrong one. Oh, okay. I'm going to show you one other thing that's really important to NVivo, and that is NCapture, which is a plugin that you can download yourself. It only works for Chrome browser, and it allows you to import material directly from a web page. A lot of the time, if you try to save a web page, you'll only save it as a link. You can't just create a PDF from a web page. This allows you to create a PDF from a web page. It saves it as a special file, so you can't open it directly as a PDF, but it's really easy to import that file into NVivo. So now I'll show you how to add NCapture. Oops. So it's really just Googling NCapture for NVivo. It only works for Chrome, so you have to use Chrome. It'd be nice if it worked for some other browsers, but Chrome is popular enough that I think we can live with it. If you click it, then all you have to do is click Add to Chrome. Add extension. And it's been added, and it's right up there. You can see it. It's this circle with the orange arrow, and it's right up here. So anytime you're on a web page that you want to add content from, say something that maybe isn't going to be available through a database or as a PDF, let's just Google interview with J.K. Rowling. Oh, this is a good example. We'll even do a video. It can capture web pages as web content, and it can even capture videos. So if we want to do a video of the interview with J.K. Rowling, we just go up here and click the NVivo button. You have to click accept to their user agreement before you can use it. And here it'll give you options on how you're going to, on what exactly you're going to capture. So you can have just the video only, and it will import just the video. You can get the whole web page as a PDF, but if you do that, I don't believe the video will actually play. You can even get this comments section, which is important to note because NCapture is geared towards capturing social media data, but you can really use it anywhere. So if I do that, it will say, it already gave it information. You can even select nodes to code it at, but you have to type them in if you have to know the name. I don't need to code it to a node, so we'll click that, and now we'll go back. You might have seen it downloads this .nvcx file. That's a special file for NVivo. It won't open in anything else. And then if I go to import, you click the NCapture button again, and it's not there because it's got documents selected. So we'll go to Browse and go to the Downloads folder. And there it is right there. And we just import it. It's pretty much a standard import wizard. And if we click J.K. Rowling talks Harry Potter and more, it should give us the video. Oh, and that scrolls. So there it is. And you can click to edit it, and you can even code sections of the video if you want. And to code a section of the video, it's just, again, highlighting the section of the video you want. Let's pretend right here she's talking about the character Hagrid, and we want to assign that to Hagrid. We can code, right-click, code. Right-clicking is your best friend in this program. And I don't have anything made for Hagrid, and Hagrid isn't a node. He's not a theme, he's not an idea, he's a character. And where do you put a character if you are doing that? You put it in a case, because the case is your unit of analysis. So it could, like a node, it's up to your discretion what you're analyzing. You can make anything a case. It can be an idea, it can be a person, a place, or a thing. Here I've got different cases, but right now I've got main characters. So we'll click New Node. Oh, that'll create a node. I can't create a case from here. Let's just pretend this is a case.
If you click on the case, it actually lets you create a case from
Oh, it does in there? Yeah.
New case.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, there's a lot to this. It's kind of like learning Excel. You can get up off the ground and running in a day in Excel and be doing a lot of different things, but you're not going to be an expert in it in a day. So that's just something to be aware of. But I'm always here to help you. If you run into any issues or you're trying to do something really specific and you can't figure it out, you can always come talk to me. And they do have a fairly robust user community, so you can search forums and try to do research on how to figure out what you're going to do. I'm going to go back to my slides now. And then now I've got nodes. Nodes are your thematic containers. So it's really anything you want it to be. And the more you code into your nodes, the more opportunity you're going to have to see the underlying connections between your data. So a little more on cases. Cases are useful for organizing data on a single subject. One thing you'll see over here in NVivo is case classifications, if I can get down to it. When you can classify a case as anything you want, just like creating a case, just like creating a node, it's up to your discretion. I have cases, just a few examples, not all of them have information about them, but one about the author. If I click that, it's just J.K. Rowling because she wrote the book. But I have more down here, and cases and case classifications are where you can start adding attributes or variables, as they're more commonly referred to your cases. So right now I've got humans, and if I double click on that, it'll bring up the matrix that I've coded very quickly, and you can see the different characters. So all of these are the different cases that I've created. We've got Malfoy and Dumbledore and Harry Potter, and the kinds of case attributes and case classifications that you create are really up to you. I've got their wand type up there. I've got their whether or not they're a Quidditch player, and you can keep going with this. The more you have, the more you're going to be able to see when you try to visualize things. If you double click in any of these, you can just add text. Maybe Hermione's not a student, maybe she's a superstar. And if you click the little arrow, it will give you automatically attributes that have already been assigned. Let me rephrase, values that have already been assigned to that attribute. So student is already there. Now I've added superstar. If I went to change another one, superstar would show up also in the drop down. Exploratory queries. So a query is just a fancy word for question. And ideally, you'll have a good idea of what kind of questions you're trying to ask and answer when you begin your project. So queries are based on text mining tools built-in text mining tools that allow you to perform some pretty powerful actions really quickly. And I'll show you how to do a couple of those now. So if we scroll down, you'll see under the search tab, this is where it will store your queries. But if you want to, and it is possible to go down there and right click and start a new query, but really I want to show you the Explore tab because this is really important. This is all of your text mining and all your data visualization tools in one convenient place. So I'll start with a word frequency query. And this will show you the frequencies of all the different words in NVivo. As you can see, there are different options. You can select which files you're mining. You don't have to mine everything at once. I'm going to now. But you can be selective. You can even match the number, a certain number. This will generate the 1,000 most frequent words across every file that I've imported in here with the minimum length. One important thing to note is that there is a stop word list that can throw you off, but that's more important for for something like a text search query where you're looking for something specific, it's maybe not as important. But if you're looking for something and you think it should be in there, you'll have to navigate to the stop word list and delete it out of there. Common words are like directions, up, down, left, right, east, west, and that can throw you off if what you're looking for has something like that in it. Something else is the grouping, so you can get exact matches. If you're looking for the word talk, you can get just talk. If you're looking for stemmed words like talking, synonyms, specializations, and even generalizations. And you can only pick one at a time, so you might have to run multiple queries if you're trying to do something fairly complex. But if I click run, it will show the most common words in here. The most common word is Harry. That makes sense. In the I think I have about 10 files in here. Harry's mentioned 2,336 times. It gives you the length, the weighted percentage out of all the files. So 2% of these files is the word Harry. That's actually fairly impressive. So that was a word frequency query, which helps you just see what's being mentioned the most, what's being talked about the most, which is really useful if you have a lot of different files in here and you're scanning a lot of files. And again, I mentioned this before, to run a query like this with traditional programming techniques would take a lot longer to build. This is really fast and really convenient. I also want to point out these tabs because they're easy to miss. If you click down here, it'll help you start visualizing these words. If we go to a tree map, or this is a word cloud. I wish I could make that bigger. It's just a useful, fun way to visualize what's going on in here. Tree map, this is going to be crazy, I think, because there's so many words. Yeah, and then cluster, that's the crazy one. So there's a lot in there, and you'd have to scroll way up to start seeing it. But they're just interesting, quick ways to start visualizing your query. I'll show you also, if we go back to explore, a word frequency query, or that's what I just did. Text search. So this is like Control F on your keyboard. You can search for exact words or exact phrases. So maybe we can say Quidditch cup. If you're looking for an exact phrase, like many web browsers, you need to enclose it in quotes. And again, you have the same options as before. You can select certain files. You can select stemmed words or synonyms. And we only have one instance of Quidditch Cup in all of those files. So that's from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. If I click the file, it'll take you right to it with that word highlighted. Let's do another one of those. Let's do something that's maybe more common, like the word wand. And you can see it's in 5 different files in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It's mentioned 15 times, probably because that item is important in that book. But again, you can open these and it will show you all of the places where it's been highlighted. This is good that I opened this because this is another example. This blue text here. Oh, why did it go away? That was an annotation. And this is just a little hard to do on this. Okay, well, you can make annotations, and annotations work much like comments do in Word documents. If you create an annotation, it should pop up down here. I'll try to navigate back to it. I don't know why it went away like that. I didn't realize they could. I guess that does make sense. So under notes, there are different types of notes. You have memos, which can be just quick notes to yourself or your team if you have multiple people working on something. Notes about your process. Framework matrices, I'll show you that in a minute. But here's an annotation. And there it is. So we're talking about a parallel theme in the novel, something about Dumbledore. the corruptive power of fame, and I made an annotation and a note to myself saying Dumbledore is famous, but he isn't corrupt, and neither is Harry, and he's famous. So it's just like comments work in a word processor. That's good. That's queries. So now I'll start showing you a little bit on visualizations. We'll try to get through as many as we can. But visualizations are really easy to use in NVivo. They are really useful to use at the start because you can map out your project workflow. You can map out your ideas visually, and that can help you stay the course and keep on track with what you're doing. And they're also really useful because this is where you can visualize the connections between the files. We can start seeing connections between files when we open the nodes, and we can see all the thematic content from the different files that exist together in one place. But I'll show you what it looks like when we start visualizing that. Oops. Visualizations will be saved down below under maps. So I'll start with the mind map because the mind map is what you're supposed to use right at the start of the project that can allow you to map out your ideas. The basic theme of Harry Potter, love and friendship, went out over fear and isolation. Harry has his friends. They do things in the first book. At the end, Hermione solves some crazy riddle. Ron wins a chess match, and at the end they're able to recover the Sorcerer's Stone. Voldemort doesn't use love, he uses fear, and instead of being resurrected right away after he's defeated when Harry's a baby, it takes something like 17 years before he comes back because while they ultimately do bring him back, they're so afraid of him they don't really want to. And then even at the end, when it looks like the battle isn't going well at Hogwarts, a lot of them abandon him. So that's just a good example of how you can use these. You can choose the shapes, it's all up there. Something I should note is that a lot of the time when you create a visualization or a query, a new tab will pop up. So there's the mind map tab, and I don't have time to tell you everything about it, but you can explore it for yourself. It's pretty straightforward. One important thing to note is that you can create some of this stuff as nodes or cases. Let's see what happens when we click this. And go back into the nodes. And there they all are. Everything that was in there has already been created as a node. So that's a way of automating your process as you map out your ideas. Going back down into the maps. These three maps are all going to seem fairly similar, and they just are. If I go to a project map, there's a lot in here. This is literally everything that's imported and that's been created in here. If I zoom in, you can see the symbols are different, and the different symbols represent different things. So you can code to sentiments. So if you code a passage and you want to assign a sentiment to it, maybe something that happened is very evil. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Or very good. You can assign that sentiment to it. You can even code to multiple items at once. You can code to cases and nodes at the same time. The way to do that is to hold Control on your keyboard. If you're using a Windows machine, it would be Command on a Mac. But again, here we can see the connections between all of the items that have been imported into the project so far. And this is a pretty small project. I've just been working on it the past few days, and you can see that's pretty complex. It's going up there. So if you can imagine a really robust project that you've been working on for months, it can get pretty hairy. No pun intended. If we go into the project workflow, the concept map, so I've got up here two separate maps, and the first one you can make just using these shapes. And if I zoom in, there it goes, it took a second. If you zoom in, you see the essential project workflow for any kind of NVivo project where you import files. I can barely read this here. I thought this would be, actually it's so pixelated that you can't read it. But you import your files, you select your themes, you code them, which is really the majority of the work you're doing is coding. Then you create your cases. You can designate relationships between cases, and we'll see examples of that. Then you can run your queries or visualize your data depending on what you're trying to accomplish. You might choose one over the other first, and then as you're going along, you might realize you have more coding to do, so you go back. The importance of the concept map is that it combines the other two maps, the mind map and the project map, and that it allows you to add both ideas and project items. So we see the conceptual workflow, and here we have it mapped out with the project items. At least a few of them. That's not everything. As I showed you, everything would be too much to read. I think that is it for the slides. But I've got more that I can show you. So if we go back into NVivo and go up to the Explore tab, there are different things in here that we haven't seen yet. So let's look at it. I think I showed you case classifications already. A framework matrix is important. Here's a quick framework. This is the only thing I haven't quite gotten to work correctly yet. In total, oh, wow, it didn't work on my computer. I don't know why it's working here. So this is a cross section between the cases and the case classifications and the attributes that you can select and the coding that's been done. So here we have Harry Potter and the theme that I've already established of growth. And here, this is what wasn't working on my computer. It actually shows you the node itself and the coding in there. If we scroll down more, we'll see Ron down there, and if we click him, I'm hoping it'll change and show you everything that's been coded to Ron. So when I selected these and coded these, I coded these to growth, the node, the thematic container, and the case, Ron Weasley, the individual. Let's see what else. Let's look at sentiments, because these are kind of fun. Here we've got, this one was an image, so it doesn't really show you very much, because when you code an image, you drag and highlight an area in a box. It's not going to show you that, so we have to go to the file, which you can get to by clicking that link. And it's one of those kind of cheesy quote images that you find all over the internet. It's our own choices that show what we really are far more than our abilities. I thought that was pretty uplifting and positive, so I assigned it to the positive sentiment. And sentiments are really important when you're working with interview materials. If we look at the negative sentiment, so I've got 3 in here. Oh, I do have 3. So some of them are just Harry being down on himself, and that's textual in the files. But again, we can maybe look at the image. There is no good and evil, there is only power, and those too weak to seek it. That's a pretty negative sentiment, so I coded it to the negative ones. There are different types of sentiments. You can even break it down to very positive or moderately negative. It just depends on what you're doing. And again, really useful when you're trying to analyze interview data. If you're giving 10 people a survey and you're trying to look at the links between their answers to the survey, assigning sentiments can be really useful. If we look at relationships, we can see these. I'm wondering what's going to happen when I open this. And there's nothing in there, I didn't think so. But we can visualize them, which makes it much easier to tell what's going on. So I just created a few different types. I created professor because Dumbledore's in there, and he's professor to all the students. I created rivals because Malfoy's in there, and enemies because Voldemort's also a case. So if we go try to take a look at that, let's go look at a comparison diagram and compare cases. And then a wizard pops up. This wizard's going to pop up a lot of different times whenever you're trying to assign a case, assign a relationship. It looks quite similar every time, but it can be a lot of clicking around. Open that, and let's just do, well, let's do Dumbledore and Harry and Voldemort. Oh, yeah, this should be. Nope, you gotta do two. There's a different way to do it. I was thinking of something else. Let's do Dumbledore and Harry. It's going to load all of them anyway. So yeah, there's everything that's associated with Dumbledore and Harry. This is too small to see. It's pixelated up here. I can't even read it, but it says relationship. And then this is all the stuff that's been coded to Harry in terms of cases and his other relationships. Here it says Hermione Granger and their friends. Voldemort's in there down at the bottom, and that says enemies. There's another way to visualize these, which I like even better. So if we go back to Explore and go to a network sociogram, actually, how did I do that? There we go. If you click a specific case, you can do an egocentric sociogram. A network sociogram will show you everybody who's involved. Egocentric is just it's just formatted differently so that a specific case that you've selected is in the center. And if I make that, there's Harry, he's the star. This one's a lot easier to see here. And then there's every other case that I've created. Malfoy's his rival. They're not really enemies, they just compete with each other. But you see everything that's in there and how they all relate to each other with Harry at the center. One other thing I'll note is that if you go in here, you can drag these around. If this is hard to read, you can drag them around and make it easier to read. And going back to the Explorer, we can do comparison diagrams and try to compare files or nodes or cases. Let's do a comparison of the nodes. And we just added quite a few nodes, but the only ones that have really been coded to are growth and identity. So here we see a visualization of the connections underlying growth and identity, and we see the characters that I've coded to directly as the cases. So Harry and Ron and Hermione and Malfoy are in there, and how they intersect. And again, if this is difficult to read, you can move things around. This might seem a little foreign, a little hard to take in at first, but it's going to be easier the more familiar you are with what you're working with. So if you've spent hours and hours and days working on your project, assigning themes to different content, you're going to have a much better idea when you start visualizing. It's kind of hard to walk in cold and not see something and look at this and go, what's going on? It can be a little overwhelming. So back to Explore. We did a comparison diagram and we've done the maps. Let's do cluster analysis, and that's just one that you can pick. Let's do codes, because otherwise it's going to be a lot. We select the nodes we want. So it's the same wizard, you just have to do a lot of selection, identity, and growth. Oh, that didn't really work. Okay, this was a little different than what I thought it was going to be. Let's try that again. Up here, you can see there's the cluster analysis tab, and it'll help you visualize it. But let's try that one more time and try to bring everything into it. You do have to select files. Let's just select everything that's in here. This is going to be overwhelming, but that'll be fine because we have useful tools that can help us visualize it. So here's everything. You can see these are the different files that I have imported in there, plus image files that I didn't give fancy names. They're just those kind of random, nonsensical alphanumeric strings. But you can start to see how things are connected. So it depends on how you've organized things. So some of these files are in the interview folder, and you can see them to get there together. J.K. Rowling, The Guardian, Couric with Katie Couric, an interview for Dateline NBC. Then you can see different, like the sentiments down at the bottom. The original right there is the positive sentiment, which is blue, and Voldemort negative, which is red. That makes sense. If you click them, it will open whatever you want. Double click. And there it is. Let's do an explore diagram now. So one thing I should note is that there are a lot of different ways to get to the same task or the same tool here in NVivo. I typically right click because that's just easier than trying to memorize where you're going. The explore tab is really useful, but I can make an explore diagram right here without having to navigate to the explore tab. Oh, and they made that just for that one file, so that doesn't make sense. Let's go back into this and go to files. Let's try to highlight some. Oh, that didn't work. I'm not sure. Okay. So you can only explore one thing at a time. Let's explore the node growth. And there they are. There's the different project items associated with growth. You can see the PDFs in there and the cases, which have been assigned to growth. And that is the majority of what we do in NVivo. Again, that is a lot to take in all at once. If we look for a hierarchy chart, let's try to compare all the codes. We saw one earlier, but just so we can do it again. You'll see there's a lot more in identity than there is in growth. There's the new node Hagrid, which isn't really a node. I guess it could be if you want to make Hagrid a theme. It's up to you. It's your discretion as the researcher. Allegiance, there's something in there even though we just made it. And again, always remember, a lot of the times there's going to be tabs over here which are really small, not easy to see. So let's click Summary, and that gives us a cross-section of what we're looking at. This is a little hard to read right now, but you can see the number of coded references in growth right there. There's 6. There's 11 in identity, the number of items coded 2. So it just helps you easily visualize in a single table what's going on and start to look at it through a more quantitative sense, because qualitative data can be turned into quantitative data depending on how you're trying to go about it, and that usually involves assigning some kind of code, not to confuse that, but maybe a code book. Maybe you have different colors of eyes, and brown eyes is number 1, and blue eyes is number 2, and green eyes is number 3. So that's a way of converting qualitative data into quantitative data, and it's usually useful for counts and getting things like mean, median, and mode, and summary statistics. So that was a lot of information that I just gave you really quickly. Your best option for learning this is just to play around with it. This program, or this project that I made, is intentionally supposed to be pared down. There are other options available. When you launch NVivo, it will give you a sample project that's based on real estate development in North Carolina, but there's just a lot going on there. It might be useful for you after you get your bearings when working with this to go explore that file, because you'll get some really interesting visualizations with it. And again, if you're ever having any issues with it, I'm always here to help. Anytime my door's open, you can just walk in. So you feel free to, yeah, are there any questions?
I got two quick
Yeah.
ones, actually. At the top, what's the difference under files between a file and an external?
Okay, an external is just going to be something that you haven't imported directly into NVivo. So if you have, this isn't my computer, so I can't really show you right now, but if you have maybe a text file that you didn't, that's on your computer that you didn't want to import directly into the program, it'll link to it. You just have to give it the file path on your computer.
Okay. So it just links to something outside?
Yeah, it just links to something outside the program, but not something on the web.
Okay. And then just a second question, when you're coding, you mentioned nodes and then cases. A node is like a container for a theme?
Yeah, that's the node is the theme.
And
So
then the case is something a bit more specific?
yeah, it's the unit of analysis. So if you have data and you on, let's say, a bunch of different trees, and you have the common lengths of the branches and the shapes of the leaves and stuff like, the tree is the unit of analysis. It's whatever usually going to be whatever is in the furthest column. So if we had a data set on physical traits of people in the room and put their hair color, their height, things like that, the unit of analysis is the person that we're talking about. So in this example, if I go into cases, it's up to you. So I made one for author. Do you really need one for author? Because there's only one author. Hogwarts houses, I didn't do any coding with that, but if you wanted to do that and assign specific content that mentions the houses or things that happen with the houses or whatever you're working with, you can code it to those cases. Anything I coded to Harry could technically also be coded to Gryffindor. So yeah, it's really just up to your discretion. You can make as many as you want. Generally speaking, the more you do, the greater your ability to see connections is going to be. Did we have another question?
Yes. Could this be used in a different language? I have qualitative data that is in Spanish. I don't know if I can probably use
I haven't explored that. Well, I mean, I think so, because the principles will be the same if you load that in there, and you'll still code things the same way. If you're trying to perform any kind of textual mining, you'll just enter the word in there. What I don't know is if special characters like tildes or accents is going to work, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? So again, this was a lot. It's best to just play around with, and it will take some time. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Could you bring up your last slide, please?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll bring up the last slide. I can email these to anybody who wants to get this email with a really convenient link to get to the research guide.
And you also recorded this.
And this has been recorded, yes.